Last week we talked about the layers of the earth. This week we are going to get into the nitty gritty of those layers. We're going to start with the crust. That's the outer layer of the earth. There's two types of crust. There's continental crust. That's what you and I are standing on right now, the North American continent. And that's mostly made up of granite. It's really hard and it's very thick. Now, the other type of crust, if you remember from last week, is the oceanic crust, and that's pretty thin, and that's made out of igneous basalt. So, two different types of crust. What we're going to do now is we're going to take a look at the layer underneath the crust, and that is the mantle. But we're going to separate that mantle into the upper mantle and the lower mantle. And that very first part, you've got the crust and then you've got the mantle. That first part of that mantle is called the asthenosphere. And that asthenosphere is a very unusual material. It's made out of rock, but it's not liquid and it's not quite solid. So I'm going to use a couple models to help you guys understand. The first one is a Twix bar. So if you have ever eaten a Twix, you know that there's cookie on top and then there is caramel on the bottoms if you took off all the chocolate. And I want you to think about this is the crust, and this is the very first layer of the asthenosphere. It's not really solid, but it's not really liquid. It's that movable, that caramel. So another way to think about that asthenosphere, that first layer of the mantle, and how it behaves is looking at it or using a piece of putty. So this is silly putty, which you can get at Target, and if you pull it really slowly, it's pretty malleable. Um, it'll move and flow. But if you pull it really fast, it'll break. And so that's kind of how the asthenosphere works. So let's take a look at it another way. We're going to take cornstarch right there, and I'm going to pour it into a bowl right here. I'm going to take about just a couple of heaping spoonfuls, and I'm going to add just a little bit of water. And you kind of want to go slow with the water because you don't want to add too much water. I'm going to start mixing it up. I'm going to put you guys on pause here. Okay, I have made my asthenosphere, my mantle model, and basically this is Ooblick, which you guys are probably familiar with from kindergarten, preschool, maybe third grade. And it has unusual properties. It's sometimes scientists will call it a non-Newtonian fluid because it can act like a solid and it can act like a liquid. So you can see I can pour it. And however, if I move fast, just like the putty, I can take some and I can make it into a ball. Oops. And there it is into a ball. And then if I let it go, it'll go right through my fingers. So a couple things you can do the lab. Mr. Shah and I have written a lab for this, and it's super fun to play around with. So a couple other things you can do is you can take your spoon and you can hit it really hard, and you'll notice that it stops like a solid, or you can sink it in. So you could do the same thing with your finger. You can press really hard, or you can go all the way down. So if you do it fast, you could walk on it, or you could sink in it. Now, how am I going to turn off my... Oh, I'm going to have to use my... Oh, no. How am I going to turn this off? I can't turn it off. Okay, one way to get rid of it is move it really fast. No, it's not going to work. Okay, I want to show you one more thing, which is really fun. You can roll it in a ball like this. See how it's a ball? And you can kind of, oh, darn it, I'm not going to be able. Super fun to play with. And the nice thing is you can tell your parents, hey, I need cornstarch. Play around with this. So you can make a ball. You couldn't do this with a liquid. You couldn't make a liquid into a ball and then just let it go. There you go. And my computer is covered in Ooblick.